Hello, everyone. I'm Darlene Young from Arlington, and I'm here to welcome you to another segment of our program, of our series of Mindful Health Alternatives that appears here monthly on CAT TV, Channel 15. The goal of this series is to introduce you people to a more healthy and less stressful lifestyle through different methods. Our guests today are Jonathan Kramer, MD, and John Hurst, MD, who will be introducing you, our viewers, to energy healing. Energy healing is also known as energy medicine, energy therapy, or spiritual healing, and it's a branch of complementary and alternative medicine, and holds the belief that a healer can channel healing energy into the person seeking help by different methods, such as hands-on, hands-off, just holding the hands over the person. Dr. Jonathan Kramer graduated from SUNY Medical School and did his residency in New York in radiology and then a fellowship in neuroradiology. He then went to Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and was on the faculty there until becoming involved in Pittsfield, Massachusetts at Berkshire Medical Center. He has studied energy medicine since 1979, completing Rosalind Bruyère's Crucible program for students. He stopped practicing Western medicine after his diagnosis of lymphoma and now continues to do healing work as well as volunteering his time for several different organizations. Dr. John Hurst, MD, has practiced family medicine in and around the Bennington area since 1989. He began studying energy work in the year 2000 and made the move to make it his primary practice in 2010. So sit back and watch our presentation about energy healing. If you come up with any questions, feel free to get in contact with me here at CAT TV at 802-442-8868 or to give me an email at darlene@catamountaccess.com. So enjoy the show and thank you for tuning in. Bye.
Welcome to this show on energy medicine. I'm Dr. John Hurst, and this is my friend, Dr. John Kramer. And the reason I've asked my friend to come, he's also my colleague, is that he got me into this incredibly unusual and amazing world of energy medicine. And that was not a completely easy thing to do. Both of us were science trained. We both went through medical school, became practicing physicians, and were trained to think in a scientific method, and paranormal experience was really not something that was discussed in our training, certainly, and not easy to even find a way to think about. And so I wanted to do this show and was asked by the station to talk about this way of working that really is very out of the box from a Western medicine perspective. But what I've found is that it's added so much richness to both the way I practice and to my life. And I am incredibly grateful for my ability to study with some great teachers. So I thought I'd start, John, by just talking a little bit about how we both found our way to working in this alternative way. And I guess I'd start with myself saying that I had always been interested in complementary medicine. And even in medical school, watched acupuncturists work, went to a chiropractor's office. We started a course in nutrition, which was not traditional at the time. Now it's more common in medical schools, but it wasn't so much in the early 80s. And my curiosity was very up, but there was no particular aspect of any of the complementary medicines that I felt really compelled by. And then in, I believe, 1998, I stumbled on this book, which I didn't think I even wanted, and a friend bought it for me, even though I told him I didn't want it. He was an ER physician, and he wasn't interested in complementary medicine. But he bought the book and handed it to me after I told him I wasn't interested. That's remarkable all in itself. But anyway, there was a lot in that book. The book was called Afterwards You're a Genius by Chip Brown, who it turns out you knew. I didn't know him at the time. He was a a journalist from a Philadelphia paper, I think, who wanted to research alternative medicine in the United States. And he wrote a lot about Rosalind Bruyere, who was a gifted healer, is a gifted healer. She lives in California. And what was amazing for me as I read about what he was describing, and he was very skeptical also coming into this. He wasn't taking anything at face value, but he was very much won over by her. And I found myself electrified by the descriptions he gave of her work. And so I ended up going to, because she lived in California, I went to one of her students who practices in New Hampshire and had a session with her. And wasn't so sure that anything really happened there. I left a little disappointed, actually. It was very pleasant and relaxing. But as it turns out, the next day I had a Tai Chi practice, and our class met once a week, and my class was the next day after that session. And as it turns out, my Tai Chi had changed dramatically. My way of practice had changed. And so I knew that by doing this sort of mysterious hands-on healing thing that I didn't know anything about, something had changed in me. And it was shocking, actually. And
what was that? I've never heard you. I never knew this.
You never knew that part of the story.
Yeah, all the years that I've known you, I haven't heard this part.
I think I wouldn't have given it any credit if I hadn't felt the difference in my practice. And then I'm not sure I would have given even that credit, except that my teacher, who never commented on how we were doing, came over to me and he said, "John, I have never seen you move like that." And so it was at that point that I thought, well, something happened here.
Yeah, magic.
And she told me to contact you because you only live 45 minutes from me and she was 5 hours away. So then I contacted you, and you pretty quickly got me to see, to attend a class of Rosalind Bruyere's. And that was sort of how I got introduced. And she is an amazing teacher.
There's nothing like going to the source.
Yes. So what about you? How did you...
Listening to your introduction, I remembered something that I haven't thought of for many years, and that, I was always interested in spirituality in my own way since I was a kid. A lot of kids are much more in touch than adults, right?
And maybe easily intuitive, yeah.
And maybe a lot wiser in many ways. Like Wordsworth talks about, the child is father of the man. And, Wordsworth spent his lifetime trying to get the wisdom back that he thought he had as a kid. Anyway, but aside from that natural interest or facility, I remember in my first year of medical school, this is what I remembered. I was involved in the American Medical Student Association. Do you remember AMSA?
Yes, I did that also.
It's a national organization, chapters in every medical school. And I somehow got involved. I was just an involved person, and I was curious. And I went to the national conference in March of 1979. March of 1979, my first year of medical school. I'm dating myself. And besides the interesting medical lectures, there was one we had a program, and one of the lectures there was healing through prayer. And I thought to myself, well, there's something you don't see every day in the medical school curriculum. So I signed up for it, and it was run by a man named from San Francisco named Dr. Hank Kowalski, or Henry. I imagine it's Henry Kowalski, and he was an internist, and he had a lot of great stories. But they were there were stories. Stories of bones that were broken, that his patients would come and he would do hands-on, and he would pray. He'd do it through Jesus. That was his vehicle. And subsequently I've learned there are many different paths to utilizing energy healing. So his path was through Jesus. And he would pray for broken bones, which would be healed, in 2 weeks instead of 6 or 8, and tumors that shrank, and also healing animals. And it all sounded wonderful and incredible. We're scientists. We smile when we say that because we have Western-trained minds, and we're not supposed to believe that which is not reproducible. And anything that deviates from the scientific process is suspect. And anecdotes are,
A dime a dozen.
yeah, they're just stories.
Right.
Unless you know the person, and then they're stories, but you know the person, and it may be it's a true story, okay, but it's still just a story. So anyway, so Hank told a bunch of stories, and I was enthralled, but skeptical, and as my training taught me to be. And I went up to him afterward. There must have been 150 people in that particular session. Everybody scattered except for a handful of people at the end. And I went up to him and I asked him if he could do anything for this finger. I had a broken finger. I forgot about this story. I had been playing basketball the week before. The week before leaving, I used to play a lot of basketball, and I blocked a shot and blocked a layup on the way up, and I just jammed my finger, and these two bones overrode one another. The skin split. There was a fracture. I was looking at this very white, ropey thing, my tendon.
Right.
I couldn't believe how white it was. And it didn't hurt so much, but my finger was all, I couldn't play anymore.
Right.
We ran, me and a couple of teammates ran across, sorry, this is kind of a long story, but it's an answer to your question. We ran across the street to the emergency room. There happened to be a hand surgeon on call that night, and she reduced it, put the bones back in line, put a splint on it, sewed it up. I had 6 stitches, and then said, we'll see what happens. The tarsal plate was the volar plate. I don't remember. I think it's called a tarsal plate. There's some plate that's there, and if that is broken and the fracture went through that, usually there's arthrosis and
Affects the joint. Yeah.
and it often freezes. So she thought that I would heal, but that I would need an operation to regain anything more than 50% mobility. And I didn't find this out until a few weeks later, because my dad was a doctor, and I went home and I went to my orthopedist, his friend, and he told me this weeks later. Anyway, so I went to the conference. I asked him if he, what he could do for this. We sat in a circle. There were 8 people. He put one hand on my shoulder and the other hand on my finger, and he said, anybody want to help me pray for Jonathan? And there were a few, maybe evangelical people, I don't know, or people who were just
willing to try,
and people that were not fazed by this, people that were familiar with it, and people who maybe had been doing healing through prayer. It's been done since time immemorial.
Right.
So I forgot all about this. Within 5 or 7 seconds, I felt this incredible heat in my finger, and I was thinking to myself, because I'm skeptical, I was thinking, is this auto hypnosis? Is this hypnosis? Is this suggestion? I was trying to think of all the reasons that I could be feeling heat in my finger, besides energy, because I didn't know what energy was. And it went on for about 10 minutes. And it only came up to about here. I guess everything is so subjective. And it lasted the entire rest of that day, the entire next day.
That sense of heat. Yeah.
That sense of heat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like I had my hand in a cup of hot water. That's what it felt like. I had my finger sitting in hot water. For the rest of that day, the entire next day, and intermittently the third day. And then I didn't notice it anymore. And I thought, I forgot about it. And when I went home, I was out there for 5 days, and I went home and, after a week or so, or 10 days, you change the position so that the joint doesn't get frozen.
Right.
And you try and break the adhesions, and so my dad's friend, the orthopedist, was making me bend it, and I remember trying to bend it as much as I could, and I barely moved it. I couldn't. So I changed the position, he put the splint back on, and it came off, I don't know, in 3 weeks maybe. And it wasn't 100%, but it is now. I mean, it took a while because the swelling had to go down. But he was amazed at
how well it moved.
how well I healed. And I remember thinking to myself, if there's a 1 in 100 chance that, I used to be very positive. So I said to myself, if there's a 1 in 100 chance that this is going to heal perfectly, I might as well be the one. It's got to be. It's got to be somebody. So, and I was playing basketball within a couple of months after that, and it's 100%. So that was my first real experience with energy medicine. And then life got busy. 4th year, medical school is so intense, and then 4th year, at the very end of my medical school, I took my last rotation in England, and then traveled around Europe, and I met a cousin of mine from Switzerland. She invited me to go with herself and her husband to northern Italy, the Italian Alps. We drove and we stayed in this beautiful remote village, and we had a great time. And she was into energy. Her husband was a physician, and we spent the week playing with energy, and that was my real introduction to running it. And chakras, and we practiced on each other. And I remember I had a girlfriend in Paris at some point in that trip, and I did it on her, and she keeled over from. I was helping her with a headache. So it seemed, still it's anecdotal, but it seemed very powerful. So those were my early introductory experiences.
You were clearly receptive, though. You weren't completely skeptical. You were willing to put your hands in.
Yeah, I want to be I want to be convinced, but I'm open to it. That's like most of life.
Right.
And then I started, like you. Then I started reading books, and the first, I think, Brew Joy. You know that book?
Yes, sure.
Joy's Way. A great story about another physician who's a pulmonologist at University of Southern California, I think.
Yeah. Oh, SC.
USC. Had chronic recurrent pancreatitis, and I think he might have mentioned Rosalind in his book too. I think they knew each other.
They did know each other.
Anyway, he got better, but he left medicine. He left conventional medicine. It was just too stressful for him. His book, I started reading Deepak Chopra, and I started pursuing my spiritual path.
And this is while you're still in training. You're still
This was at the very end of training.
Of residency.
Very end of fellowship, residency and fellowship. And then in 1991, I was at a wedding, and I met somebody who was telling me about this remarkable healer woman in California named Rosalind Bruyere. And he said, in fact, she teaches in Massachusetts. I was living in Boston, working in the big hospitals, and full of myself, thinking I'm a good neuroradiologist, and I was the flag bearer. And he told me about Rosalind. I looked her up, and I think that was before the internet, right?
That's right.
91.
Or right around that time.
So I looked her up, and I sent away with a postage stamp and a letter where I called up, and I got the stuff through the mail, and I filled out the forms, and I took my first session with her in 91. And that, like...
In Williamstown.
In Williamstown.
Right down the street, yeah.
Yeah, and I would take a week with her twice a year in Williamstown.
She came east twice a year.
She came 4 times a year.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Wow. I missed all that. Well, we have to be careful because our stories could go all over the place.
Right.
But I think...
But that was that introduction, and she, as you know, personally is a very powerful healer with a track record of many fantastic anecdotal stories, and also has subjected herself to the research programs of a number of medical schools.
Right. She was a good teacher for us because she really liked the medical profession. She wanted to help us understand how this could be
She understood
possible.
how handicapped we were.
It's true.
To have this medical school education.
Our left brain, yes. And yeah, she forgave us that. She also had been an electrical engineer, so she was she had a really strong intellectual mind.
She was the one that I remember her saying, people become dumber by degrees. People get dumber by degrees.
Yeah, she is an incredible teacher, and she certainly was she was my boost. I mean, she was what really got me rolling. And I think what I wanted to do is to talk a little bit just about the nature of healing, and start with the fact that we are, just by who we are, we have incredible capacities for healing without any assistance whatsoever, that our bodies naturally do so much right that it's actually that's the most miraculous piece.
You know that as a family practitioner, this is the big secret. You're going to hear the big secret now. 90% of people that walk into your office are going to get better no matter what you do.
I do. That sounds perfectly fair, actually.
So yeah, so the innate healing that you're talking about, that living organisms have, that's the great mystery.
It is. I mean, our ability to self-correct in the face of severe, physical injury or disease processes that are really completely upsetting to the harmony of the body, sometimes without a lot of assistance. And even when there is assistance, a surgery, the recovery from a surgery is remarkable also, how bodies knit or heal.
Yeah, the wisdom, how do cells know to...
Right. So I think the reason this ties in, from my point of view, is that as we talk more about energy, and it's a problematic word for me, but I don't know a better one right now, so that's why I use it. But that there is something that is unifying and holds us together, that is still very mysterious, and but that's sort of the realm that energy medicine deals with. Those forces that are equilibrating, connecting, and keeping us in alignment. Because otherwise, we're really a collection of all these molecules, but what keeps that coherent pattern? There's something that binds everything.
Right. I don't want to get morose or anything, but when I was a kid, I remember reading the Time Life Science series and the expanding universe. Well, if the universe is expanding, I used to, as a 9 or 10-year-old, I used to get stuck at the point where, what is it expanding into? How could okay, here's time and space. What's on the other side? Anyway,
This could be another whole avenue of discussion.
right. Anyway, but I was saying that because there's another mystery that keeps cycling through, and it's one that I don't have an answer to. Just like that time space, physical universe one. So I don't want to be morose, but we've all in medicine you see life, you see death. And you see the same person lying on their deathbed. You see them talking, animated, with the family, coherent, and then a short time later, they're not there. Or it's just the physical is left. What's that about, doctor?
Yeah. Clearly, I don't have an answer for you.
So there's some force, what you're unable to really name better than energy. There's some force that animates us and that has wisdom and gives us life.
Coherence in life, yeah.
So I don't have an answer, but I think it's a very clear way of isolating what we're talking about by looking at a body that is alive and one that's dead, because the cells are all the same.
Right. And suddenly the force of it.
At least initially,
gone.
there's no physiologic difference initially.
Right. And then we could talk about all the stories of people who have passed away and then somehow get brought back and what they describe. But I don't want to go there.
Right.
What I did want to talk about on the same note as that we have this incredible self-correcting capacity is that we are also subject to glitches all the time. And some of them eventually will correct on their own, and sometimes we need help. And in this discussion about energy healing, I really don't want to imply that energy healing is the end-all be-all, although I think it has the potential for that, and I feel like at least I'm in my infancy in understanding that. But it is certainly, for me, become a tool in the armamentarium, in addition to Western medicine, which has many great tools to assist people when we're stuck, when something's not going well, we're not self-correcting. So, anything you want to add about that? Otherwise, I might just go right into talking, which you've already raised, is this whole concept of spirit. And people have many words for this terrain, and it's the terrain that makes scientists, I think, some scientists, really uncomfortable, because it's so hard for us to objectify. And I think it's that very inability to objectify it that makes us distrusted. But to my way of thinking, it's also the heart of the matter, the heart of our existence and being, even though we can't put our finger on it or see it under a microscope or measure it on a meter. So, and that's that animating force again. And so for me, it was as if a giant wall came down that I felt suddenly in this world of energy medicine that it was expanding the scope of the world that I inhabited multifold. And on one level, it was where do people go after they die, which I had no coherent thought of before, and I still don't have a great explanation, but I have this sense of ongoing presence even after passage, which I didn't used to have, and that people can show up even though they don't have a physical body. And then I started to think, well, maybe that means we're spiritual beings temporarily in a physical body, for a period of time. So
that's a bumper sticker.
yeah. So that's sort of part of allowing for we could be, rather than physiologic processes, collections of chemicals, molecules behaving by some mysterious way coherently, now having this spiritual side, and it's that richness actually which has really deepened the work for me and deepened my life.
Yeah. You said the S word.
The spirit word, I did. We joked about that at the hospital as we were developing a program in integrative medicine. That word was really not allowed to be used. And I think people often do pick other words for it, and that's okay too. It's okay to be skeptical until you have direct experience yourself that something makes sense. But I've had significant examples that make me feel more awake about all that now.
Yeah, me too. I'm not going to go on record telling any of those stories.
Well, and so then to talk about the concept of energy, again, it's a very problematic word because we use it for the energy that we deal with day to day: light energy, heat, electrical energy, these forms that we're accustomed to, and yet I feel like the unifying energy that flows through us, that is connected to the spiritual realm, from my perspective, is just as important, but so far has sort of eluded measurement in the ways these other things have allowed us to measure. And that's where...
It's like gravity. You can see the effects of it,
right,
but nobody's ever been able to say why. And
there's only theories about how it works, right? Right. So, but I do use the word energy because in the way I perceive, it has a felt quality of presence and motion, or I guess would be, or flow. And so my teachers, Rosalind Breuer was one, Stephen Weiss was another teacher who is an osteopath and works with his hands also. Both of them use their hands primarily to both perceive in the people they were working with and help direct shifts in the people they were working with.
right, you mentioned that last night.
And
with Rosalind responding to Jim Kepner's incessant questions.
mm-hmm. Right, she
gave him a violent breakthrough, or a precipitous breakthrough.
Yeah, she's a consummate teacher, and I don't know that I'll go into that story, but I think I can remember one time when she touched me, and she was talking specifically about prostate problems, I think at the time, and I said, well, how would you reach the prostate? It's an internal organ, it's not so easy. How would you go about that? So she just put her hand on my leg, and I could felt that warmth that you talk about. So come up my leg and into the base of my bladder, which is where the prostate sits, and it felt like it just lit up.
She is a master.
She is a master. It was a great teaching experience.
I just wonder, we were talking about anecdotes before, and I mean, the elephant in the room that you and I know about is my cancer. And I suppose I should at least acknowledge that.
Sure.
So Rosalind, when I was diagnosed in December of 1996 with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a bad histology and a bad staging, first thing I did was, I mean, I was a radiologist, so I got my own workup done quickly. Most people wait weeks. Got it done in an hour and a half. But and then I went to see my friend, my friend who was an oncologist, that afternoon, and got a biopsy that afternoon, and so we knew what we were dealing with. But then I called Rosalind, or I had a friend call Rosalind, and bottom line is I went through chemo, as you know, for 6 months, but I was healed within a few weeks. And I have no proof, but I know that it was Rosalind who had the biggest hand in my healing. I went to see her for 5 days. Telling your story about the energy that you're feeling at the base of your bladder, I felt it. I felt it. It was the first time she ever worked on me. I had been studying with her for 5 years or more at that time, 6 years almost, and that was the first. And I was always a reluctant troublemaker in the back of the room, not wanting to believe what the more sensitive people around me were saying they saw. Things have changed. But anyway, I went to see her, and as you know, 5 days later, I went home, and my first follow-up chest X-ray was normal. It was gone.
Which is much clearer than you would have expected from just chemotherapy in that first cycle.
Never seen it. I used to do follow-up exams, CT, and conventional films for people with Hodgkin's and many other tumors, and it was just never seen that quick. And my oncologist was uncomfortable saying this is, anything other than an extraordinarily rapid response, is what he said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then, because I didn't believe it so much, I continued to do the other 5 months of chemo. Anyway, so that is a personal story of what I think is the direct effect of Rosalind and energy healing, and your story of feeling the energy reminded me of that, because when she put her hands on me, I felt it like a it wasn't like a pair of cardiac cardioversion paddles. It felt like a 9-volt battery, I felt like a trickle charge is the way that but I felt it. I felt this buzz going in there. And so I'm still a scientist, but I'm also someone that trusts my own experience.
Right.
And I think all people should.
So the next place I wanted to go with this discussion was to talk a little bit, if we're talking about energy, is how is that organized in the body? And my sense is there's many systems for understanding that. The Chinese have a system of meridians, channels of qi flow in the body. And what Rosalind taught, which was a system that I felt really, there's a lot of mystery here too, but it was a system that, again, made so much sense to me and really helped sort of map out the scope of what it means to be human, was around the chakra system. And standardly, although there are different systems with different numbers of chakras and different systems, but she uses a sort of 7 chakra-based system, and I found that again is sort of a map of the layers of what it means to be human, and so I thought we could just go through them. Those 7, just as sort of concepts and realms that we inhabit. And when we're fully alive, each one of these is fully present and activated.
Right. the energy centers.
But the center is that's right. I haven't defined chakra yet, but
We haven't defined energy, body energy yet.
right. It's true. It's hard to
Healing
define.
energy. You know, when people ask me about this, the one thing that I come up with that I think may get the mind a little part way around it is a martial artist. We all know somebody that's taken martial arts and they want to break those 5 boards. And so if you talk to any martial artist, any karate expert, they'll say, yeah, I can break those boards, but I first have to concentrate my energy to do it. Otherwise, I'll break my hand.
Yes.
So that's a
A classic example of using your energy wisely. Yeah. So let's just go, since time is flying here, let's go through the chakras briefly. And I want to talk about them just as realms. So the first chakra is usually thought of as the physical life force chakra. It has to do with basic liveliness of the physical body, its ability to sense on a physical level what's going on, and its vitality, its basic physical vitality. The next chakra level is 2, emotional.
And where is that first one?
Well, I don't really want to talk about that today, if that's okay. In part because it's our whole body is involved. The actual center is in the perineum,
but it's within
base
us.
of the spine. It's within us, and it's within all our tissues. So I'm viewing it sort of as a realm rather than just as the energy center itself. Second chakra has to do with the emotional realm, and so it's on the level of feelings, the emotional response to our physical sensations. That you might get angry or sad or something as a result of some physical experience. But it's the sort of the next level of organism response. The third is mental, having to do with thoughts, mental activity, thinking. Not so much wise intuition, but more, Rosalind would say, as the bean counter, the very linear left brain. And then the fourth realm is the heart chakra, the fourth chakra, centered in the heart, but again, having to do maybe with cause, supporting a cause, or what causes you're drawn to, things that call us into service. Love is part of that, but it's also, there are deeper callings, like where you really, where you find your passion or your devotion lies. And if you want to add something here, feel free. And fifth chakra, I think of starting to really move more into the spiritual realm. The heart is the gateway to the spiritual realm. But the fifth chakra...
I'll just say one thing.
Sure.
The tumor that I had was 6 centimeter node
Yes.
in the aortical pulmonary window, basically against my heart. And Rosalind, when I saw her, she said, "Of course the tumor is at your heart. And your work, working with radiation, may have been partially the cause of this, but of course it happened at your heart because your heart wasn't in your work." I'd always been thinking about other kinds of healing, spiritual healing, energy healing. And I stayed with radiology.
Yes. Yes, so that's we could go on for hours here, but the movement into the spiritual realm starts to be why are we here? What's our point in this lifetime? And making sure that we're living from that, as well as from the intellect, from our emotions, and the physical. So, fifth chakra, I started to say, is the, I think of it as sort of the perfect body, the map that our body is laid out on, One of the words that's used is the etheric realm, meaning it's an energetic grid or matrix that we may be designed, our physical bodies may be designed around, and it has a quality of perfection. It's actually a delightful realm. Sixth chakra is where people talk about sort of the higher wisdom center, intuition, the third eye, but it's that level of knowing that isn't linear or intellectual. And then the seventh chakra, and this is an incredibly simplistic discussion of these really mysterious realms, but would be more a connection to spirit or divine, is how we were, how I was taught to view it. So again, I think what would be useful to do here would be to actually go through a little bit about how the work is practiced and finish up with that. John has graciously volunteered to get on the table, and then I would begin to work as I would normally do with my hands, and I'll explain it as I go.
And never say no to ice cream or a good glass of scotch.
Or healing.
Or healing.
So when I start to work, actually often I'll start with somebody standing up and view them, but for purposes of this demonstration I wanted to start right on the table, which is where I spend the bulk of my time. And before I would even make any contact with Jonathan or any patient, I would want to just prepare myself for the holiness of what I'm about to do. And I'm not talking about myself being holy here. I'm just talking about getting in a place where I can be of service and be clear, and where my faculties are again, able to be of service for Jonathan, but not in my own way. So that I'm not dealing with my ego or wanting to have a certain outcome. Those things would actually serve to get me out of the way. And where I approach him or any patient with incredible respect and the honor it is to be in this spot. So I get myself ready, and then once I feel like I'm in that place, I'll go ahead and make contact very gently, and it's really in a very listening kind of way that I'm here. I'm not trying to bring myself or anything in. I'm just sort of honoring where he is, maybe a deep listening. And I usually start at the feet because this is a place that just feels a good place to get a sense of the whole body without also being very invasive for John. And so what I'm starting to get a sense of the fullness of energy here, which is not always the case. John is a high energy person, and so there's a lot of energy, which is a great thing. And there feels to me almost like a tidal flow to that energy. And so I'm, without interfering at all, I'm just trying to notice, is there any place here that would be helpful, or where my assistance could be more useful than here at the feet? part of this phase also is for me just to let him get used to my presence. And when I feel like he's energetically really comfortable with me being here, then I can start to move on. So I am going to move, and I don't follow a particular order to where I move. I go based on what I think his body is telling me. And so I'm going to slide right under his lower back, the sacrum. And if you could lift your head for a second, great, and come back down. So again, this is just a checking in for me. It does not involve a doing at this point, or a deep listening. I like to think that by my bringing my presence in the mode of service to him or to any patient, that they're able to draw on whatever resources I have to accomplish whatever they need to accomplish in their own healing. And so a lot of what happens in this way of working for me doesn't necessarily require any doing on my part. It's more a being present. I don't know whether it's because John had dental work this morning or not, but I'm feeling pulled more up to the head than but it does feel like something's trying to work itself out up in the head for me right now, and so I'm just supporting that. Healings are normally very quiet things. I don't talk much normally, and I think for purposes of demonstration, I will stop at this point just because it's a relative place of ease. But I'm going to pull out my hands, and I might have gone to his head next. There's no. I could work wherever I felt called in the body to support. And sometimes it would require some manipulation or gentle manipulation if I use some osteopathic techniques, but they would be very subtle. And other times it's just very quiet.
Thank you, Doctor.
So I am glad you joined us for this hour. And if there's other questions about energy medicine, maybe the studio will have us back. Also, I could be contacted. Again, my name is John Hurst. You can contact me at home on my email, and that's jhnhrst@gmail.com. I would be happy to answer questions. And I appreciate your open-mindedness, and hopefully this was of interest. Thanks.
See you on the table.